I invite you to open your Bibles, please, to Romans, the 12th chapter. We're coming to the end of this particular chapter, and at question number 24 at the bottom of the page, what should we understand that should never cause us to feel like we are a helpless victim? We're in the process of overcoming evil with good, and we're looking at those who persecute you, those who do evil against you, how we should react to them. And sometimes when you do that, you can act like, well, I'm a victim. It's what has happened to me. They cursed me. Yeah, you're supposed to react to a certain way. They've done you evil. You're supposed to react a certain way. People have done evil, and he said, well, don't avenge yourself. Don't give all that to me. So we live in a time where something happens to me, I am the victim, and everybody else has got the problem. You help me, I'm the victim. And what's interesting to me is that in Romans 12, you may have had something done to you, and yes, you're a victim. They robbed your house, they murdered your husband. I could be thinking about, or murdered my wife. It's about me. I feel helpless. And we're victims. And we're innocent victims a lot of times. And I'm not erasing that. But what helps us understand that these verses, we're not helpless. We're not helpless victims. Because when you're helpless, you don't have any way of reacting that's constructive. You're a victim. They got me. They stole everything in my house. I'm poor now. I'm helpless. And that there's a release point that we can use, that it's in our power to do, that indeed is very constructive in helping us heal. Because you don't absorb all of the poison done to you, and you just absorb it because I'll just take it. I'm like a turtle. I am a strong Christian. I've got a strong back, and you just kick me down the road, and you do anything you want to because I'm a Christian. Well, a Christian is reacting in a certain way, and it's a release. And it says, bless them that persecute you, curse not. If I'm a helpless victim, I just hate, I'm not going to curse them. I wish something happened. No, I'm not going to curse them. What am I going to do? I'm a helpless victim. I can't do anything. I can pray for them. And you get on your knees and you pray for your enemies, you won't feel the same way about them. There's not that hatred that is going to just kind of corrupt you from inside out. You're not going to allow that to happen. God doesn't. Renders no man evil for evil. Okay, but I did. It happened to me. Take thought for the things honorable in the sight of all men. How am I going to react? I'm going to react in an honorable way. I'm not a helpless victim. I'm going to have a release point to deal with the evil done to me. And I am going to be involved and say, well, I'll take thought for things that are good in the sight of all men. It's still wrong to hit a woman, so I'm not going to hit her when she cursed me out because I didn't get out of her way at the stop sign. It's still wrong to hit a woman. It always will be. But she deserved it. Well, maybe so. Don't think that way. You're not a helpless victim. Avenge not yourself, but here's the point that I think answers the question. Avenge not yourselves, beloved, but give place unto the wrath of God. How am I going to react? I'm a helpless victim. I can't do anything. Just sit there and absorb all my evil done to me. No, I'm going to turn it over to God. He knows better than anybody else. They may be having no witnesses to that murder. God knows who did it. And let him and his time deal with that. Give place to the wrath of God, because it's written, vengeance belongs to me. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to God. It belongs to God. And he said, I will recompense, saith the Lord. He will follow through. And that's happened to people we know. A lot of us went to the trial of Janine Bishop's husband, who was murdered in their yard. And it was cold trails for years and years and years. They could not solve the problem. They didn't know who did it. And I remember going to that trial. A lot of us did. Janine thought she knew who did that, but she just had to live with that, and she found out what she thought was not true. But in God's time, years later, 20 years plus, we found out who murdered her husband. And justice was done. God works in his ways, but you turn it over to God. Would it have been like 20 years to have just inner hatred, thinking I know who did it, and let that eat you up? No, you're not a helpless victim. You are one that can react to how you should react. And that's why this last verse, be not overcome with evil, but do what? Overcome evil with what? It's always good to bless and pray. It's always good to think thoughtful things honorable in the sight of men. It is always good to say, it's not my place, it's your place to avenge. And it's always good to give soup to people who are sick, who are your enemies, when they're sick. Give them cold water when they're thirsty. It just amazes me in God's way that this is how he wants us to react to evil done to us. We cannot control the evil that people do to you. They'll lie behind your back. They will say all things about you. You may not hear about it. But God knows. God takes care of that. You can say, well, I'm going to pray for my enemies. I'm going to be, what's the honorable thing to do? You're going to be looking at that way of reacting to the evil, because the moment evil's done to you, you have control over something. You're not a helpless victim. You can either do evil or you can do good. And what are we told to do? Overcome evil. I'm not going to let evil be 2-0 in my case. And I win the tiebreaker, because I'll overcome the evil with the good. Now I'm going to put something on the side of good. And he gave you 4 release points when you are so incensed with how evil you've been treated. And I think we ought to see how practical God's wisdom is. And we're to overcome evil good. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But am I wrong? Are you a helpless victim? You don't have any money. They wiped you out. You've had a death. You've had all this that happened, injustice done, and you can't get anything done. And you're 2 hours on the phone with Social Security. You just hang up because who's there to help me? I'm a helpless victim. No. And these things will get you off the floor in your pity and give you something constructive to do that will be directed toward the evil done to you and the one who did it. And it's very personal. If your enemy hungers, what do? Well, let the government take care of them. Well, it may be a month before they get some food. What can you do? You can get it done real quickly, can't you? And we'll talk more about that attitude with that. But that's, if you think you're a helpless victim because of the evil done to you, I want you to think about that. Put these things to practice. And while haven't, you will not absorb the evil that can ruin you from inside out. You'll be releasing and letting God take care of it and doing that which is good in his sight. All right. Question 25. What does Paul mean when he says we can heap coals of fire on the head of our enemy? So let's get, what verse do we find that in here? All right, 20. Back to our evil. If thy enemy, he's done you bad, he's out against you. If thy enemy hunger, ignore him. He's hungry, what do? You feed him. That's his need, isn't it? Essentially how God, let's take care of the need. We don't put a bureaucracy out here, let's take care of the need. And the need is met. If he thirsts, we're supposed to give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. Now, what does that mean? What does it? You say coals of fire on his head. What does that mean?
Well, it just bars their anger, because if you were to strike back, then that gives justification for what they've done. But if you have kindness, it tempers that.
Yeah. Is it kind that, hey, they got coals of fire on them? Was that kind to think that? I think that's the way we look at it sometimes. I just got even. I just got even. Look what I did for you. I did you good. And I hope that coals of fire get on you. You ought to feel bad about what you've done to me.
To think that negates verse 17.
Yes. And it puts in a perspective. You're trying to overcome evil, not get even with a person. It's not about the person any longer. It's what they did and how you're going to react. It just so happens coals of fire, Psalm 140, speaks about that's God's judgment upon evil. What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? Fire came from heaven. And it's looked that way in the scripture about not my feeling I got even with you by doing you good, and don't you feel bad about what you've done to me. It's not that at all. It's the fact that this is God's judgment upon evil. And I just did you good. Ain't about you, it ain't about me. I just did you good because I did it God's way, and you're being blessed, and He is putting coals of fire. He's there to extinguish the evil, because if I react in that attitude, I might as well done him evil, because my attitude's bad, because I still got a vengeful spirit. I thought I'll let God take care of that. It's written, it belongs to me, God said, not you. But that's God's judgment upon evil. That's how He goes about doing that which is good. For example, Psalm 140, in verse 9, here's the Psalm of David. As for the head of those that compass me about, they're out there to cheer him on. They're there to destroy him. Let the mischief of their own lips cover them. Let burning coals fall upon them, and let them be cast into the fire in the deep pits whence they shall not rise. Now, you say, well, I can have that attitude today. Erase that for a moment. I'm just trying to show coals of fire. Why would He appeal to coals of fire? That's always been God's judgment. He's looking at it from the standpoint of people who have not just did me wrong, but God, they've ignored your way. I'm walking in your light. I know that. I'm compassed about with all the evil. But the point is that here's God's way. Sometimes you reap what you sow in God's way, right? God's not mocked. And so here's the fact that things come upon them that they've done to me. That's that's acknowledging God's way of doing things. And sometimes it comes back on them. Haman, for example. It comes back on. They'll build a tall gallows to Mordecai, and he's hanging on it. God's ways work that way. And I think David is expressing it. And then the coals of fire upon them. That's been God's way of dealing with evil. God, you bring the coals of fire is your way of destroying the evil. Because what happened? I did not add to evil by retaliating or thinking bad or making you want to feel bad because I did something good for you. You might as well quit trying to make the soup. Because that's not the heart of a Christian. Won't you feel bad? And what happens if you never make any friends of your enemies? And probably you won't. What'd you do? It's not here making friends. It's overcoming evil. And they may never change. And you may say, well, what an ingrate. Well, that's pretty hard-hearted to think that they wouldn't care what you've done or say thank you. They may not. But your attitude is just as bad as your actions. If we're thinking, I'll make them feel bad. I'll make them some chicken noodle soup. And it'll taste good because I make good chicken noodle soup. And I think they'll feel a little bit. Coals of fire. I'm bringing coals of fire up on your head. With that attitude, you've taken it out of the realm of how God deals with evil, and you put it in your realm of self-pity and get even, and the heart's not right. Now, I'm just talking. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to pray for your enemies. It's not easy not to retaliate and do things back at them what they've done to you. How'd you like that? And all other things of wanting to take our own vengeance, get even on our way. Just disregard them about what they need. But if they need it, I will do something and I'll heap coals of fire upon their head. That's the wrong way to look at it. That's God's way of extinguishing evil. And what did you do? I did it. I allowed that to happen. There wasn't evil motives in there. Worst, I'm not going to retaliate with evil. You got a need. I'm going to help you. I'm to love my enemies. And that's the way of a Christian. But it's exalting God's way. And that's how we overcome evil. By not doing evil, I'm getting even with you. By not doing evil, I'll take vengeance on you. Getting even, God, I'll pray to you to just persecute those who persecute me. I'll curse them in prayer. But it's the idea of knowing God's in control. He will judge. And David is just looking at it from the righteous standpoint of God, his ways of dealing with things, and turn it over to him. Jeremiah says, I have set forth the complaint that he had, that everybody was against him, and in order to see how God will deal with it. And that's a good way to deal with our inclination to want to get even when we've been wrong. Anybody with another heaps of coal of fire on their head? Yes, sir.
Jerry, in addition to God's judgment, I think you might also give that person something to think about. They might think, this person's not Joe average. They are not retaliating. They're doing something good for me. We might even plant the thought in their mind that maybe I could be trying to follow what that person's doing.
I think it would probably surprise them. That's true, and there's again, you're serving the Lord that way too, and in a good way. Joel, that's hard.
To me, the goal is to prick the person's conscience so that that person will be penitent for the way he reacted. The example that I think of, my grandfather was a machinist in one of the industries along the channel, and what some younger men would do is they go outside and bang the side of the building, and he would jump and ruin something that he was working on. And well after he retired, one of those men came to his house and apologized for that. The man was dying of cancer that had done that. And he wanted my grandfather to forgive him for doing it.
Wow.
And that's the ultimate goal, is that you want to see repentance in a person and a
That's right.
life in his life. So you want him to have a burning conscience, I guess we would say, a burning conscience that he's going to correct his own ways.
It's a good point. Both those are good. And those are good attitudes to have. We want to bless them with God. We want them to change and not curse them back. And we can do that in prayer as well.
There is Proverbs 25, where that verse is taken from, where it quotes in verse 21, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, if he's thirsty, give him water to drink, that will heap coals of fire upon his head. The end of that verse it says, and Jehovah will reward thee.
Our reward was not getting even, was it?
There's a reward for us when we've done that right and good,
That's right.
regardless of what's being done to us.
And Paul's taking that verse from there. I mean, that's a great way to put the end of it on there, because my reward is not getting even. My reward is, hey, it pricked their heart, and they think twice about what they've done. Maybe they want to change their ways and be like a Christian. Those would be good motives to have. But Paul was not speaking about make them feel bad with cold fire. The reason I say that, all my life I've heard people discuss that. That's the way of getting even. That'll make them feel bad. coals of fire. And we've taken out of its context in Proverbs 25, and we're taken from the context of here. Our attitude and our actions are most important before God. And while we're not a helpless victim, we also know the way that he has prescribed that how we overcome evil with good. And verse 21 just sums up that section. It sums up that section. Anything you want to add to how we react to when people do you wrong? And anybody here had anybody do you right all your life? We got young and old. We sometimes feel we've been wronged. We feel like somebody didn't understand what we're trying to do, and it's all that sort of thing. And judge our motives. All those things can happen. And Christians going to have enemies, and we're going to have enemies. And this is just a wonderful chapter for practical living, and it's hard to live up to, but it's effective. And you don't become a turtle with a hard shell, and you don't become someone just soaking up all the evil and go around as a helpless victim either. Any more thoughts on before we go to chapter 13? Chapter 13 deals with 26. Let's fill in the blank, okay? Be not overcome by what? Don't be overcome by good. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome. Put all those things to practice. Overcome evil with good. It's always good to pray. It's always good to think. It's always good to turn it over to God. It's always to do good deeds. All those things are good. And that's how you stop the evil from spreading, because evil can now come from us in reacting. These are all reactions when you feel that you've been wronged the most. That's a critical time to be thinking for the things that are honorable in the sight of all men. Pray for them. And if I have an opportunity to do that, which is good, all those things. Okay. Now, as we go into chapter 13, we are introduced to our relationship as a Christian. Here's another responsibility. Here's another practical application of the teachings of God in the New Testament, that we begin to observe our relationship to government. And is anyone here outside of government today? I think we all have to submit to that, and these are the reasons why that God tells us to do that. Are all forms or styles of civil government ordained by God? What kind of government did the Israelites have before God? They had a theocracy. And he worked through judges. He worked through kings. We see that in the Old Testament. That was a style or form of government. We have a democratic republic. We have a republic. We vote our leaders, and they do our wishes. And government's before the people. And sometimes that gets off course, but we have a constitution that can bring it around. Well, does he want one style over another? He chose theocracy. We've got another one. So we can ignore that. It's not the styles or form of government, it's the concept and the reality that we need government to protect the people. What is open borders, and everybody's a citizen passing through, and they have their rights and all that. How's that lines of boundaries of local government? How's that helped our society? Innocent people getting murdered, innocent children being murdered, people dying of drug overdose, of things that they might not think, but that's not a drug. That was something to ease my pain. And people trying to make money, and you don't have any laws to govern people. What would it be like if God didn't invent the stoplight? I thought about that the other day, especially when I was having to stop at all the stop signs because the lights were out. That's just too much to do, isn't it? Oh, wait on the other guy to come and all that stuff. Guy on the right gets to go first, whatever the laws were. But we have lights that change. Now, I think some lights are staying too long now, but it's so nice that I know I'll get across, and it'll be pretty safe. I thought that's a great invention that we had. So we need a government. We have policemen, we have firefighters, we have people to protect us. and to really makes our life livable. Because when you don't have a protection, there's no laws, and people will do what they want to do. We got Genesis 6, and you got God, that the powerful are the ones that are going to use their power to destroy everybody that's in their way. It's survival of the fittest, and sometimes we're not the top dog. We overcome, and so how come that violence happens? When people leave God out of a higher being, violence happens because I can. And I can do violence to get what I want from you. And you're a victim. And so government has its place. And we see he's mentioning here about how important that is. So it's not the style of, you may have a king and a queen, and you may have a republic, and you all formed, you may have a theocracy, and that sort of thing. And we see how that's been perverted through the years with nations that are saying, well, I'm serving God, so I'm killing you, that type of thing. But it's not that. It's the form, not the form or the styles. It's something that is set in place for our good. And he says government is part of that. Now, let's talk about, in the moments we have, give all of Paul's reasons why we should be in subjection to the higher powers. That's our government. Higher powers above ourselves. Why do I have to submit to my government that's in place, regardless of forms it is? What form? So, just read through here. Why should we do that? What would be the first one we read in order here? Higher powers, for there is no power but of God. So we start with him, and to your point, and to the powers that are ordained, appointed, put in place by God. Here is God's will, that indeed I submit to somebody lower than he. And it's the powers that are ordained of God. So therefore he resists the power, withstandeth the ordinance of God. So God's in place, and here are those that you've placed above me, and if I resist the power, I'm resisting who put it in place. You're resisting. I'm resisting the mayor. I'm resisting the governor, whatever. No, you're resisting. You withstand the ordinance of God. So what's the next reason why I need to do that? Because if you stand that, you also shall receive to themselves what? You're going to jail. You're going to be executed by the government. You shall receive to themselves judgment. So it's a government in place to stop the evil. I think that's why Paul kind of talks about overcoming evil with good. What's good? Government. As God has ordained that. And you receive themselves judgment. All right? I've got the wrath of God upon me. All right, what comes next? For rulers are not a terror to the good work, but to the evil. So that's why it's in place. And wouldest thou have no fear of the power, do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise from the same. So I'm not going to be in trouble with the law. I appreciate the law. I don't want to get in trouble with the law. And you do good and evil. It's overcoming evil with good. Part of that is submitting to the government, and they're in place to bring forth the power of the government and come upon them. For he is a minister of God. So he's not ordained of God, but he is a servant of God. The government is a minister to God, to thee for aggravation or good. Bureaucracies can grow, and it can be a lot of permits, and aggravation, got to comply with the government and all that sort of thing. But he is a minister to thee for good, because we're the evil that can come upon you. We've seen the results when our government is weak, when that happens. But he says, but if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. We'll talk about that in another question about capital punishment. You're going to receive judgment, and it's not going to be good. But he's a minister of God, is an avenger of wrath for them that doeth evil. So I'm going to turn it over to God. Well, how he'll work through government, just like with Janine's situation. It took a time, but his way did allow her to understand those things. Now, what's another reason for submitting to it? That's not all. Wherefore you must needs be in subjection. Well, why? Not only because of the wrath, I'll get in trouble, but because of what? Whose conscience? Mine. Because I know what I'm supposed to do. That's there. And God's told me how I'm supposed to do it. It's not, well, I'll disobey the laws and it'll be fine if I don't get caught. And here's a child of God having that option of I'm going to disobey the law, whatever it may be, to get into the country and stay. I'm going to disobey the law, and the president's not going to kick me out. Obama's not going to do that. And we're going to have undocumented people, not criminal people, not people who have broke the law. Laws go out the door. Here we go. And all of a sudden, what's happening now? We're getting the words, but eventually, did they break the law? Did they break the law of our government? And therefore, they're going to reap the habits of that. But just because I remember a few years ago when the president was coming in after Obama, I remember I was at a place where I guess it was a Hispanic church. We were doing English and Spanish. And I'm there talking to people, and some of them had relatives that were illegal, undocumented people, and they worried about what was getting ready to happen to them. And I thought to myself, we submit to laws of government not because we get caught or not get caught. What does he say here? It's your conscience. If you've been taught of God and you have a conscience, I need to submit to the laws of government. How are you going to get in this country? Well, how's a Christian going to get in this country? 6 or 7 years, whatever it takes. I get it, whatever. And the laws need to be changed, and it doesn't need to be back and forth, and here's an open door, and here's a shut door. That's how governments work. And things that needs to be cleaned up. But just the thought of knowing that it's wrong to do it, but they're not going to apply the law, therefore I am free to do and break what's on the books. I couldn't do that as a Christian. And that's another reason for submitting to our government. Even though I didn't get caught, my conscience bothers me because I was driving too fast. That's something I've got to take care of and look out for. And we'll see how we do that too. Yes, sir.
When I got out of high school, I had to prove the direct. That was part of obeying the law. Now, that was not academic because we had gotten out of Vietnam. But nonetheless, that was the law of the land. I had to register for the direct as I turned.
I did too. It's hard to believe we don't have that anymore, but at that time, we went to the lottery system. I was in that between where we're drafting. We were drafted, but then we had a lottery system to see who would probably go. And I was at Texas Tech, and I was registered out of Fort Worth, which has millions of people. And a guy from Abernathy was sitting with me, and we were watching our numbers come up, our birthday, and connected with the numbers. He came up about third time. And he just showed his books. I'm going to join because I'm going to pick what I'm going to do. But he knew from Abernathy, there's not that many people, 18-year-olds signing up. He knew he was going to be drafted. He said, I'm going to go join. Mine was 356 out of a Fort Worth, and so I was never drafted. But you submit to those laws. You sign up, and you're going to go and you try to, if you're going to serve in another capacity that you couldn't kill someone, you had an option to do that one too. But there's the sense of respecting the laws, and people know the laws. They're not going to be forcing it. So get in while you can. How could a Christian do that? I mean, there's temptation, and there's also when people are desperate. Sometimes this thinking goes out of our minds, but we need to have it there that when I do get desperate, that's not one route I'm going to go, because it's for conscience sake. It says that. Not just cause of wrath, it's because of conscience sake. That verse is not concentrated enough these days about the Christian and the laws of the land and immigration and so forth. So we need to put that in our hat. And don't smoke it, just absorb it, okay? All right, I think our time is up. Does God approve the civil powers carrying out the death penalty? Why don't we save that one for next time? And we will, you have questions or comments you'd like to add? I'd like to hear them. All right, we'll start there along with it next time. Thank you.